Something's gone sour between the Lagina brothers and their on-staff archaeologists, and the fans have noticed. Have you? Across Season 13 alone, the team named the new shaft after their scientists, not their archaeologists. Marty dug his own trench beside the archaeologist's hand excavation, and by the finale, a hammer drill was driving through the floor of her dig. But this tension isn't new. Fans have been clocking the microaggressions since Season 9. And we have a few theories on why this relationship may have soured. A shaft named for the wrong people. The Lagina brothers just put a new shaft into the ground on Oak Island, and they named it after their scientists, not their archaeologists. The shaft is MS-1. The M is for Dr. Fred Michel, the geochemist who had been running water analysis on the Money Pit area for several seasons. The S is for Dr. Ian Spooner, the Acadia University geochemist working alongside him. Their water and soil chemistry, presented to the team in the War Room in a Season 13 episode called Road Trip, had identified a specific zone of the swamp where silver and gold concentrations clustered higher than anywhere else they'd sampled. The team agreed to sink the next caisson there, and then they named the caisson after the two men whose chemistry chose the spot. One episode later, in an episode called Island Hopping, Marty Lagina walks over to a stone feature on Lot 8 that Fiona Steele has been hand excavating methodically for most of the season. Marty picks up a shovel. He digs his own trench beside her dig in an afternoon. 3 episodes after that, in the season finale, Dr. Spooner brings a hammer drill onto that same lot and drives 2 3-foot test holes through the floor of the archaeologist's excavation. None of those 3 moves is announced as a change in how the dig is being run. None requires a single voice raised on camera. But each one is a moment where the chemistry program is making a decision the archaeology program would have made differently, or slower, or not at all.
I believe it will have an impact on trying to understand what happened here in the island.
That's the story Season 13 is telling, beat by beat, without ever quite naming it. What the archaeologists have been doing. To see what's happening in Season 13, you have to know what Niven and Steele do. Laird Niven has been the team's site archaeologist since Season 4, which is going on a decade on this dig. He is the Nova Scotia-based archaeologist licensed under the province's First Nations consultation regime to work on Oak Island, which means he is the legal gate through which anything excavated on the island has to pass. His job simplified: slow the dig down, catch what shouldn't be destroyed, and issue the cautious read in the moment when the team wants to push forward. Fiona Steele is younger, a research student of Dr. Spooner's who has carried much of the recent hand excavation work on Lot 8. The cradle on that lot, the stone and mortar feature the team uncovered in Season 13, Episode 16, is hers in the way that an archaeological feature is the responsibility of whoever is working it. She is the person inside the basin, slowly removing material, recording what comes out, and at what level. Both of them are still on the island in Season 13. Both of them are still doing their jobs. What changes is that they are no longer the gate. The team is no longer waiting for their reads to close before making decisions about where to dig next, what to dig beside, or how to interpret the season's headline result. Their hedges? The careful won't close it until the evidence closes it. Its sentences that are what archaeology actually sounds like in practice keep getting folded into someone else's working hypothesis. The friction doesn't show up as an argument, it shows up in the verbs. 6 episodes on Lot 8. In Episode 22, The War Room, Dr. Spooner and Dr. Michael walk the team through their water chemistry case, the highest silver and gold readings across the search area cluster in one specific zone of the swamp. The team agrees to sink the next caisson there, and then the team names it MS-1, for Michelle, for Spooner. That naming is not a small thing. Naming conventions on Oak Island carry weight. The DMT borehole on the island carries the initials of Drake Maxwell Tester, Craig Tester's son, who died in March 2017 at 16 years old. Naming a shaft after someone on this dig is how the team writes its loyalties into the ground. MS-1 means the scientists chose the spot. MS-1 means the search has accepted, in the most literal possible way, that the chemistry case is now leading where the drilling goes. And in the same episode on Lot 8, Niven offers a careful procedural note about the cradle. The soil and rock composition in this section of the feature differs from other sections. Steele adds that they are not yet near the bottom. Neither archaeologist closes their read. The War Room does not wait. The next caisson is already named. In Episode 23, Island Hopping, Marty orders that control trench beside the cradle. The trench hits slate at 6 feet. Steele's hand excavation, inside the cradle the same week, is already deeper than that with no rock floor. Marty says the line on camera, "The cradle is capping a shaft." That interpretation arrives, on screen, before any archaeologist has issued one. Niven and Steele have not concluded that the cradle caps a shaft. They have not concluded anything yet. They are still working. But the shovel and trench experiment took an afternoon, and the hand excavation has taken months, and the screen time the trench gets makes clear whose process the show is now anchored on.
So we might be dealing with something that we know is untampered with.
In that same episode, in a parallel storyline that is happening on a completely different continent, Rick Lagina is at the Angra do Heroísmo Museum on Terceira in the Azores. He is meeting with archaeologist Tiago Rodrigues, Portuguese historian Manuel Gandra, and Azorean archivist Francisco Nogueira. The Portuguese Azores reframe of the stone shots, what their composition means and where they came from, is happening with outside experts in another country, away from the on-island archaeologists entirely. In the season finale, Pure Gold, Spooner brings the hammer drill onto Lot 8. He drives 2 3-foot test holes into the cradle floor itself. The cores come back. Niven looks at them and gives them a single-sentence assessment, too soft for bedrock. That hedge does the work the archaeologist's role on the dig now does, a read on someone else's experiment after the fact. Hand excavation inside the cradle then descends below the surrounding bedrock level Marty had hit with his trench, still without striking rock. Steele's read on the feature has shifted by the finale. The cradle, in her words, may be a different feature than originally thought. That is a midstream walkback from her own earlier framing, delivered not as a confrontation but as the methodical archaeologist conceding ground on the meaning of her own dig, while the chemistry program runs ahead. That is the 6-episode pattern. The friction is in the verbs. What viewers have been watching for. This is not a season 13 story. The friction between the Lagina brothers and the archaeology side of the operation is something longtime viewers have been tracking for the better part of a decade. Across seasons 4 through 8, Niven was the team's primary site archaeologist, and the on-screen relationship was warmer. But it was already producing the kind of in-team friction the audience named. Jack Begley's good-natured nickname for Niven, Negative Niven, became part of the show's vocabulary on camera. The nickname was affectionate. It also captured something structural. When an archaeologist's job is to slow down and ask questions, and a treasure hunter's job is to dig, that role asymmetry produces predictable friction. Niven himself, speaking off the show in a later interview, said he'd rather spend his time with the Oak Island folk than in the company of other archaeologists from the province. The archaeologist preferring the treasure hunters to his own discipline is its own kind of evidence about where the team's center of gravity sits. In Season 9, Episode 6, The Root Cause, the friction escalated. After Niven and another archaeologist found Mi'kmaq pottery on the swamp dig, the discovery triggered a Nova Scotia work stop order under First Nations consultation requirements. Marty's response, in the war room, was to back down on archaeological methods for the time being. Miriam Amaro, Liz Michaels, and Helen Sheldon were told they were leaving the active dig at the end of the week. Niven stayed. Sheldon would eventually return in a later season. But the moment crystallized what viewers had been watching. When the treasure hunt timeline and the archaeology timeline collide, the show does not slow down for the archaeology.
People are hopeful that once the rock comes up out of the ground, that there'll be an aha moment and you'll see something.
Longtime viewers cited Marty's own words back to him in the months that followed. The years between then and season 13 produced more of the same pattern. Niven moved off the main dig for a stretch and into work at the Samuel Ball Foundation on a different lot, and viewers asked whether he was being moved out of the way. In Season 12, Episode 16, Steele said bricks were found all over the island, and Rick Lagina, in the same episode, told the camera that bricks were concentrated in a few specific spots and that the concentration was what suggested construction to hide treasure. Same episode, opposite framings, the archaeologists read contradicted by the principal inside the edit. The audience noticed. That is the backdrop Season 13 lands on. What changes in Season 13 is not the existence of the friction. It is the scale of the decisions the friction now governs. What changed was the scale. 3 pressures plausibly converge in Season 13 to produce the shift. None of them are stated on camera. They have to be read off the procedural evidence. The first pressure is regulatory. Mi'kmaq archaeological oversight on Oak Island has tightened over the past several seasons. and hand excavation under that supervision is slower than it was earlier in the show's run. The production cycle of a History Channel season does not accommodate that pace indefinitely. Spooner's chemistry program offers conclusions on a faster timeline. There's also treasure hunt urgency. Marty Lagina is 70, Rick is 74, and the financial logic of this dig has always required eventual recovery, not eventual archaeological publication. 13 seasons of negative space results, of boreholes with no void, and caissons that bottom out with nothing in situ make a chemistry-led case for the treasure is in the wood we've already pulled up extremely attractive to the people writing the checks, and a generational handoff is sitting on top of both. The same season that elevates the chemistry program also elevates Alex Lagina to lead a research trip in the Azores. The next generation of Lagina decision-making is forming around scientific consultation rather than the archaeologist licensed dig that defined seasons 4 through 12. 3 pressures, all building, all real. And the season's headline finding is where they converge, what the wood says. In the season finale, Spooner reports a finding that reorganizes everything. The 2024 Shaft 2A wood sample, wood that had been pulled out of the ground a season earlier in routine drilling, has come back from his lab with the highest silver readings and the 3rd highest gold readings ever recorded on the island. The implication, which Spooner is careful to frame as a working hypothesis, but which the show treats as the season's takeaway, wood itself, organic material, in close contact with whatever the depositors put in the ground, may be the treasure indicator, not the soil, not the cradle, not whatever void anyone hoped to find under it, the wood. If that hypothesis holds into season 14, the methodological pivot is permanent. The entire archaeological program of slow, controlled, in situ excavation becomes a secondary discipline. You don't need an archaeologist's license to test a piece of wood in a lab. You need a chemist. The legal gate Niven has been for 13 seasons. The slow down and ask questions function the dig was built around becomes a permission you stop needing because what you're really doing is sampling, not excavating. The shovel work continues, but the question the shovel is asking changes. It is no longer, what's the stratigraphy, or what's the cultural context? It is, where do we get more wood, and how fast can the lab process it? That is a methodological repositioning that, in the language of professional archaeology, would be hard to defend. Stratigraphic context is what tells you what an artifact means. Sampling without context tells you what an artifact is made of, which is a different and narrower question. But on a treasure hunt television show, where the question has always been what's down there and where do we dig next, the chemistry answer is the answer that gets the production cycle moving. Marty closes the episode with a careful note that the cradle work is not finished until the team understands what lies beneath it. That is the season's last hedge, but it's Marty's hedge, not Niven's. The Lagina is now the one closing reads. What stays in the ground? Season 14 is confirmed, November 3rd, 2026, 25 episodes, with filming starting in the early summer. If the wood as indicator hypothesis is the operating frame, S14's dig plan will be built around sampling rather than archaeology, and the on-staff archaeologist's role will compress further. If the hypothesis collapses on closer testing, Niven and Steele's slow procedural reads on the cradle become the only remaining live thread on Lot 8, and the friction inverts. Either way, MS1 is in the ground with the scientists' initials on it. That naming will not be undone. The chemistry case shaped where the caissons went last season, and the metal detection case shaped where the surface attention went. Together, they explain why the archaeologist's role compressed the way it did. If you haven't seen the deep dive on what Gary Drayton's metal detection find said about where the team was actually looking last year, that's the other half of this story.